Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you for taking the time to join us today for our webinar on HACCP for Maldives Resorts. I am now Dishanika, and I am pleased to welcome you on behalf of Maldivian ISO Consultancy Company. At Maldivian ISO Consultancy Company, we support organizations across the hospitality, tourism, food and service sectors with consultancy, training, auditing, inspection, and management system implementation. Our goal is to help business strengthen food safety, quality, compliance, and operational excellence through practical and internationally recognized solutions. We are delighted to have with us today Mr. Rasita Niroshana as our resource person. Mr. Rasita is the managing director of Maldivian ISO Consultancy Company and brings more than 22 years of experience in quality management, food safety, HACCP, TPM, lean manufacturing, and ISO management systems. He is a qualified lead audit for several international standards, including ISO 22000, 9001, 14001, 45001, 50001, and ISO 13485, and has worked with organizations across Sri Lanka, Maldives, Oman, Dubai, and many other international environments. With his extensive industry and consulting experience, I am sure today's session will provide valuable insight into HACCP implementation and food safety best practices with resort operations. We will have a Q&A session at the end where you can freely ask your questions and interact with the resource person. Thank you once again for joining us. Now, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Rasita Niroshana to begin today's session. Mr. Rasita, over to you.
Thank you, Nawadi. Thank you, Shahan, and then giving me this opportunity and for the nice introduction. And then thank you very much for all the participants who joined the program today. I think, your basic expectation to understand the basic HACCP requirement, not only the theoretical part, not only the theory part, basically a practical approach. So we have done so many HACCP programs in different industry, but in this program we try to fully focus on the resort industry, right? So if you take why resort, why HACCP is very important, I'll try to explain that in bit because. See, if you are manufacturing a food product, say for example, we'll consider the high risk product. It can be meat, it can be margarine, or whatever the high risk product, right? You have a the manufacturing facility has a luxury, you can manufacture the product and keep it for a until it get QA approved, right? You can draw the sample and then you can send it to the own lab. Like a lot of the manufacturing factories, they have their own lab, and then you can keep the product for like 4 days, right? Until you get the the microbiological clearance. Right now, my question to you all, what is, are you comfortable? Can you do that kind of activity in the food business where you are like currently engaged? I don't think, right? Your guest is not going to wait 4 days, right? You are, so what you do is like whatever the product you the manufacture, I mean like the cook or whatever, do a value addition, automatically it will give to your customer. So your quality as well as the food safety management system has to be very strong, right? Because manufacturing industry, you have that luxury because you can keep for 4 days until you get the microbiological clearance. Then you release the product into the market. That's fine. But you don't have that luxury. So people like you all, working in the resort, working in the customer food servicing industry, the HACCP concept is very important. So let's try to understand. I hope you can see this GMP covers. Like, what do you mean by GMP? So before you start with any HACCP program, right? HACCP, Hazard Analysis Critical Control Program, you have to make sure your GMPs are properly in place, right? So with our experience, we notice a lot of industries, they started HACCP without considering the GMP part. Right, so you ended up with so many critical control point we call CCPs. That's wrong actually, because you need to monitor a lot of things. But if you have a proper GMP, good manufacturing practices, then of course you don't need to worry about it. Like GMP basically cover about four requirements: facility, equipment, warehouse, and people, and then cleaning and sanitation. What do you mean by facility? Say for example, if you take a storage facility, if you take a kitchen, right? If you like, depend on what you store. Like say for example, if you are storing a vegetable item, or if you are storing an egg item, right? What is the condition you need to maintain in the kitchen, particular facility? If you are keeping a meat item, so the facility can be like your freezer or your cold room, right? So what is the condition of this facility, right? And maybe not only the facility, inside the facility, you might need to consider the outside of the facility. Is there any dust coming in? So if there's any like toilets nearby, so those requirements you need to basically cover. And then of course the equipment you're using, the chopping boards, right? I believe like 90-95% of you are coming from the resort background, right? So my I try to focus very much on focusing on the resort area, right? Not very much focusing on the manufacturing part, right? So this like basic requirement like the equipment, your chopping boards, right? So imagine like if you go back and check your chopping board, like if there's a damage in the chopping boards, or if maybe the knives you are using, if there's a damage in the knife, right? So what happened to this particular metal part? Right, maybe you are using like the squeezing equipment for the juices, right? Or maybe like utensils you are using for juice making. So the condition has to be there, like they are cleaning, like you can't have bends and all, like the all cleaning requirements. So those are the basic requirement, right? So your equipment, and then say for example, if in your butchery, if you are taking a banzo, right? How frequent you are taking the banzo, cleaning the banzo, and then imagine like if you are checking the microbiological load in your banzo, right? You know what I mean, right? Have you anyone has done that exercise here? Like your banzo, like and then check the microbiological load. Maybe you can raise your hand like this. Is there anyone who has this experience? Checking the microbiological load in a benzo, or maybe you might have experience in yeah, okay, Prashant, you have done, right? So okay, there are Abdullah is there, okay, so there are a few people. Just tell me, like, is it a kind of yeah, so we have Akur also, like has done that. Okay, so there are a few people who has done that. So what is the outcome? Is it good or bad? If it is bad, you can put this signature. Is it bad or good? What do you think? If it is good, funny mark. So what is the outcome? Is it good or bad? What do you think? That's good, right? Chaminda is good. Okay, fantastic. So you must be having a very nice. Okay, so people who has done that, they have a good practice. So I mean, like out of three people who said okay, they're doing it, their results, the microbiological load, like TVC, coliform, like airborne count and all, like it is quite maybe quite low, right? So that's really good. So it's been your cleaning and sanitation process will be good, right? So right, so then that's very important. But what about the other people? Like so if you're doing monitoring, we'll come back to that point, right? So you need to check that part as well, right? So then like cleaning effectiveness. So you will say, okay, I'll be basically using this amount of detergent, like you say 10 to 1 or 10 to 2, whatever the instruction given by the manufacturer, and then you will be using it, and then they will say, okay, keep for 5 minutes and then rinse it. But there are two things you need to monitor. One, you can't keep, you can't add additional detergent. Why? Because then it will become a chemical composition, contamination, because then your product will start to taste chemical, right? I'm like, agreed, you are using a food grade chemicals, but that will be a quality issue, right? So you have to make sure, like, when you do the rinsing, all chemicals has to be wiped out. And then of course, it should take out all the microbes. So then only way of checking is you need to take the subsample and checking it. So this equipment part has a big role, cleaning and disinfection, and then warehousing. So, warehousing again, that look like is like a facility, right? You have dry warehousing, and then you have a cold room, freezer. All warehousing has to be there. So there are certain guidelines. So whether you are monitoring temperatures under these conditions, and even dry warehousing, there are certain conditions because sometimes we have noticed there are some product, especially some chocolate product you need to keep under a AC condition, maybe 25. But when you go and check, those products are in a room temperature, maybe around 30. So that's a violation of the basic guideline, right? So that warehousing part. And then, of course, in the warehousing, the pest control part has to be there, right? How frequent you do the cleaning, right? And then there's a one particular area. You might be using some freezers, you'll be using a mixed product. So maybe a mise en place, we use that word, mise en place, that basically you talk about semi-finished product, right? So imagine if you use semi-finished or cooked product with the raw material, what would be the problem? Say, for example, you have a meat product you cooked and then you put it in the same freezer with the raw materials. So the cooked product mean it basically go through the killing step, the heating step, and then you have a raw product which have so many other bacteria. So what will happen if there's a same person touch these two products? That will be another contamination. So warehousing is very important, right? A segregation, maintenance condition, temperature condition. Say, for example, product like ice cream, right? You have to maintain the freezer condition. What happened if this condition damage in between? Right? Say, for example, you might have experience, right? Say ice cream, if the cold chain damage in even in transit, right? You started to get separate the water layer and the fat layer, right? And then, so what's the problem? Of course, there's one problem, you started to get a different quality, agreed, right? Because you started to get oil first, then the balance is kind of a water. So people won't get the same flavor. But there's another food safety risk. What is the food safety risk? Because whatever the preservative they add like preservative normally like either water dissolve or oil dissolve preservative. So imagine if they started to separate out, right? All the preservatives are in the either water layer or the fat layer. So imagine it's in the water layer, fat can expose to any fungus, right? So that's why apart from the quality issue, right? When they started to separate out, of course you will have this kind of a scenario. So this GMP part is very important, right? And the people. So now people can contaminate because you need people in kitchen how many how many people are working in Maldives, you have different nationalities. So we have different nationalities have different hygiene practices. But then of course when you come to the kitchen, everybody has to follow the same hygiene practices, right? So same hygiene practices. So imagine like you do for Banzo, how many people has checked their hands offs? Say, for example, you take hands offs of your people. How many people has taken the hands offs for your staff? Okay, we have one. Ankit has done that. So I believe people who has taken the results is good, right? Okay. Sarat Kumar has done. Okay. Chaminder, okay, already got the hands offs done. So the results is good. Is it results is good? Okay. Kamidugan, okay. Hamad, okay. Right. So, all right. A lot of people has taken. See, the ban so very few people, but I think hands up has taken a lot of people. That's fantastic. But what about the outcome? Is it bad or is it good? What do you think? Is it bad or good? How is your bad? Good? How's the hands up outcome? Is it bad? Good? Definitely good. All right. So don't, right. Chaminda was saying definitely good. Okay, fine. Right. Okay. So all of you are good, right? So fantastic. But I have one like there are experience. So all good, right? So you communicate this or you are taking the hands off surprisingly. I know you can't comment on public, right? Are you taking this by communicating? So today we're going to take the hands offs, right? Is that what you do, or like is a surprise one? Like all of a sudden, the hygiene manager or chef and go and started to take the hands offs. How do you do this? How do you do this? Right? So I have like one few experience like this. So if you do a surprise, you will get surprise result. But if you communicate, you can like get a good results. But one more thing, I believe all the research you have a camera focusing on the hand washing station, right? I believe all of you have a camera, right? So after this program, go back to your like there must be a room, right? You have like recording. Go back. Now the people who have said like hands off is good, fantastic. Go back and check at least last week the station. See, when you do like there are standard, right? We are right now we are in Maldives. We are working on HACCP ISO 22000, but there are kind of advanced standard the BRC as well as the FSSC standard. So this standard talk about a little bit of advanced areas like in HACCP we are talking about basically a system driven hazard, right? Basically, we talk about the system-driven hazard. But there are standards, the BRC and FSSC, they talk about areas where like people purposely, if they want to do something. So if you have a camera focusing on the hand washing station, I recommend go and check at least 1 week, right? And then you can identify people who you should check the hands ups, right? So, right. Okay. You okay with me? So because this program, I should give some practical tips, right? You good with that? You want to do that? Yeah, do that, right? So if you want, like, you can share the information with me, right? I love to see that. See, once we do this in one particular organization, right? There are several kitchens over there. So the first few kitchen results was not good, but later on, all the other places, like we'll say, okay, you have 5 kitchens. So the first 2 kitchens results bad, hands off, because it's a surprise for them. But internal communication is so strong, and the last 3 kitchen is perfect, right? Nothing, right? So we need to like as a food safety professionals, we need to identify like because we need the real scenarios, right, to take action. So this part, the GMP, we need to make sure in your resort, in your hotel, like your GMP has to be spot on before you go for hazard. So your facility, somebody has raised hands. You have question or like few people raise hands because of the question. No, no, I guess, right? Yeah, I mean, like, if you have any question, you can ask. I think like Navadi basically said you can ask later on, but of course, anything maybe you can put it in the chat. Then I can take it out, take it and discuss without disturbing the flow as well, right? Okay, and then you have to make sure your GMP, right? So there are like, if you take, if you see this ISO 22000 standard, there's a guideline called, let me type TS 22002, right? So catering, there's a guideline, technical guideline. So this guideline, if I'm not mistaken, there are 18 elements, right? So there are 18 elements. So you can check this. So all these 18 elements are basically considered as a GMP requirement. So if you are like, if you don't have proper GMP, better not to go for hazard, right? Because you need to do a lot of control points. But if you have a good GMP, facility equipment, warehouse people, and then cleaning and sanitation, if you're happy with that, and then your swab test, whatever you do, that take as a kind of verification, right? So then, of course, you like, then you can go for hazard. So let's start with the hazard part, right? So there's a definition, like, So it's basically said like, it focus on the prevention rather than in product testing. Say, for example, when I started the program, I basically explained when you are in a manufacturing facility, you're at a kind of a luxury. Say, if you are manufacturing milk, like high risk product, but you are not sending the product on the same day, right? You keep the product for 4 days, send the sample for microbiological lab based on the sampling plan, and once you get the clearance from the microbiological act, then you send the product to market. So you are making like 100% assurance. But in your case, you can't do that, right? So in your case, you need to practice real hazard, right? Even manufacturing facilities, they practice this, right? But they have like that luxury part. But in your case, you don't have that, right? So your test piece is a customer, right? So that's why the resort, hotel, like guest house, you need to make sure your HACCP control points are properly implemented, and especially the GMP requirements has properly implemented. Let's move on, right? So when you start working on this HACCP, we need to make sure, is there any legal requirement, right? So in Maldives, what are the food safety legal requirement? FDA guideline requirements are there. And then maybe you are reporting to a like, kind of a your resort ownership, or maybe you have a like group compliance requirement. First thing you need to understand that, right? So before you start, right? So before you start HACCP, you need to understand the legal requirement of your country. Say, for example, if you're coming from India, so if the legal requirement from India, legal requirement from Maldives, legal requirement from Sri Lanka, right? So depend on the country, there's a food safety legal requirement, right? And then is there any customer requirement are there? So we need to understand that part, right? And then we need to understand what type of product we do, what type of processes we do, and then what type of equipment. Say, for example, now, say if you take a resort, you have a different type of product. Say, for example, you might have a Chinese kitchen, you might have a Maldivian kitchen, you might have Indian kitchen, right? So the manufacturing method can be different, and the ingredient can be different, right? So we need to understand that part. That's the first requirement. So now you might have a question. Okay, do we need to have a different hazard plan for different? Of course, yes. Right, Chinese kitchen have a different process flow diagram. Let's come back to that, right? Or maybe Maldivian kitchen have a different process flow diagram, right? Right. So it's like that. So it you have like a lot of informations are there, right? And then so what are the food safety hazard and related to food safety management system? So these requirement we need to cover, right? Say this is like some example. You can see reference documents you need to identify. So you can see. ISO 22000 standard guideline. Or if you are going for a HACCP like Codex guideline, you can see ISO TS 22002 1 2009. Now the standard has revised prerequisite program for food safety manufacturing. So this is like basically the GMP. So in HACCP we call GMP, good manufacturing practices, but in ISO 20000 term we call prerequisite PRP, right? So that they identify different programs like part one, part two kind of a thing. So for the food manufacturing, they use this, and then even primary packaging, they have a separate guideline, right? And then codex guidelines are there, regulation, all these requirements are there. And then you need to identify what are the hazards. So there are four type of hazard. Basically, under codex, under HACCP, we talk about four type of hazard, right? If you go to BRC and other standard, we talk about genetically modified product and radioactive products, contamination products. So, but we are not going to that. But we'll stick to that codex part, right? So you identify what are the hazard, right? What are the microbiological hazard, and then what are the chemical hazard, right? So you are bringing so much of vegetables, foods. So you need to consider the pesticide residues and all kind of a requirement, right? So these requirements you identify, right? So this is just before you start the hazard, right? So you identify the country's legal requirement, customer requirement, and then what are the guideline reference documents. So these are example, and then you identify list of hazard. So depend on your kitchen, right? So what are the list of hazard you identify, right? Now let's move on, and then you need to do a characteristics of raw material and ingredient. So this is the requirement by the ISO 22000 standard. So each and every raw material, imagine amount of documents you required for this. Say for example, if you take a kitchen, can somebody tell me how many ingredients you are using? Maybe the type of ingredient can be vary from chef to chef, right? So how many ingredients you are using? So can you tell me like how many ingredients you are using in a kitchen, in a basic kitchen, in a resort? How many ingredients are there? Just give me a figure. A lot, right? A lot. Yeah, I agree. Like maybe 200, 300 plus, right? Ingredients are there. So all 200, 300 plus ingredients, we need to do this study, right? We need to do this study, right? We need to, yeah, we need to do this study, right? I don't know whether how many of you have done this study. So all raw materials, ingredients, and product contact material. So what do you mean by product contact material? Your like your equipment. Maybe it's made out of SS, maybe it's made out of aluminium, maybe it's made out of plastic, right? So we need to identify this, right? So what is their biological, chemical, physical character, composition of the ingredient, right? And then source, whether it's animal, vegetable, or kind of a thing, place of origin, right? Why we need to worry about the place of origin? Because sometimes depend on the some places, right? You might have a different ingredient. Like say, for example, some countries they have a high risk of adding additional pesticide, right? So we need to know about that, right? And then their method of production, method of packaging delivery, storage condition and shelf life, preparation and handling before usage, and then accepted criteria. So we need to know about this for ingredient, right? Say for example, say now if I had to do a like say for example, if I do a consult in a tea factory, black tea factory, and if I had to do a hotel, all right. Uh, okay, I got a question. Let's see. So what do you think? Like I prefer. Is it a tea factory or the resort? Yeah, Chamila said like because we are running local Sri Lankan. Okay, Maldivian, Sri Lankan, Indian, Japanese, Western, and so on. Okay, interesting. Chaminda would like to see this study, right? Ingredient list. So the Maldivian, you have a separate list of ingredient. There can be some common. Sri Lankan there's a different one. Indian there's a different one, and then Japanese different, and Western totally different, right? So interesting. If you do this study, nearly 800, yeah, maybe more than that. So sometimes this change depend on the chef as well, right? So these are the kind of a challenges we are facing, right? So we need to study all these requirements. So then you have, if you do this proper study, you have an understanding. Okay, this ingredient is my high risk ingredient. This ingredient is my like kind of a low risk. I don't need to worry. But this is the critical ingredient for me. So high risk in terms of food safety. So I need to have a like special concern about this ingredient, like first in first out and all, like so this will give you. So imagine this is before HACCP, right? So this is just before HACCP, right? Let me move on. So if it is a low material, so these are the example: physical, chemical, microbiological, allergenic, storage and handling condition. And then product contact material, material composition, surface contact, compatibility, regulatory compliance. Say for example, now you might have a juice making machine, right? So earlier we used hand, but now we have a machine. So you put orange and like the juice will come out. But there will be a contact surface. So is this material food grade? Do you have a certificate for that? I believe all resort you have a like juice making machine, right? So I'm like you put wash orange and then your juice will come out, right? So is this contact material is a food grade? Do you have the certificate? Yeah. Do you have the certificate? Now go back and ask from your supplier. I need a certificate, right? I need it. And then there are blades, right? Yes, food grade. Yeah, Ruby, you said that. Yeah, great. So you have the certificate, Ruby? All the food grade, right? But I know you are using, but you have the certificate? Yeah, we might not. Ask from the supplier. They might have, right? Ask from the supplier. They might have. And then the blades are there. So if you take the blade very carefully, sometimes you can see the damage. So what happened to these damages? You don't have a metal detector, right? You don't have metal detector, like in all juice doesn't go through the metal detector. So fine particles can end up in the customer, right? So we had, as a food safety team leader, we need to concern about this. So you might think, okay, juice is a very simple thing, like you wash in a proper way and put it there, you ended up with a juice. But when you open and clean it up, when you check the blades, sometimes there can be small damages, right? So just go back and check. Right now, you have a lot of homework, right? So you have a lot of homework, right? Now, then, so you start with the raw material, you finish it all, and then you come back and you work on the end product, right? So end product can be like, like say Chaminda said, like, you have a Maldivian kitchen, you have a Sri Lankan kitchen, you have Indian kitchen, you have like, Western. So many kitchen. So you have a different end products. So what is this end product, right? What is the composition? How long you can keep it this, right? What would be the intended shelf life for this particular? If you are making a bread, what is the intended shelf life, right? So maybe you have in your buffet you have a bread, right? So you are not putting like if you go and check the chiller, or you can see the expire date, but in buffet you are not putting the expire date, right? So but how can we assure that? Right? So those are the questions we need to ask when you conduct the audit, right? So the internal shelf life, and what would be the packaging, and maybe labeling, right? Like sometimes some countries have a legal requirement, maybe sugar content, right? So these are what are the label requirements. So these things in product characteristics we need to study, right? So again, I'm repeating. This is just before HACCP starting, right? So lot to do. This is like it's a kind of a groundwork, right? And then say for example now physical characters. These are example: appearance, texture, packaging, and then sensory, flavor and aroma, appearance. So chemical composition, pH level, moisture, shelf life, storage, allergenic declaration. So in your case, allergen can be a major part, right? Glutamine and all kind of a thing. So from the reception, the moment guests enter into your like the resort, right? You need to communicate the allergenic part, and then the segregation, cleaning of allergenic materials. So those has to have like special concern, right? And then microbiological load, spoilage organism, and then labeling part. You need to make sure, right? So these are the some example, right? And then intended use. So this is also very important. Why? Intended use is in like if you can see this highlighted word in yellow color, the intended use including reasonably expected handling of the end product, and any unintended use but reasonably expected mishandling and misuse of the end product shall be considered when you do a HACCP study, right? Say for example, you might ask this product like you use this as only as a like value addition. Say for example, like you say, okay, you need to take 2 teaspoons of sugar, but what happen if somebody add like 10 teaspoon, right? So these are the kind of like requirement, unintended but reasonably expected, not forcefully. Like you doesn't need to worry somebody like put tea sugar into the nose. So we don't need to worry that comes under different act, not under Food Act, right? But all these requirement we need to cover. So in food safety, we are not that much concerned about the intended use and all like, but like this hazard concept will be using for other product like cosmetic industry. We use this hazard. How many of you know this? How many of you know like in cosmetic industry, the cream, shampoo, and all industry we use the hazard concept? Do you know about this? Yeah. Yeah, they are using it. Yeah. So imagine this unintended use. See, this is the classic example. So say for example, when you wash your hair using the shampoo, what happen if like consume little bit? I mean, there's a high chance. Imagine the toothpaste, right? When you brush, like supposed to throw away, right? But what happen if there's some small amount consumed? Imagine the children. What they do? They basically like brush, and then sometimes if the flavor is good, they eat. So the manufacturer cannot say, oh no, this is supposed to be a throwaway. They need to consider this like unintended use as well, reasonable, right? So like now like there's a new thing. All cosmetic products, they use the same concept mainly because of unintended use. The lipstick, I'm like you consume everything, right? So the all the materials has to be food grade, right? So that's why they're expensive. I mean, like car wash, bike wash, you don't need to worry about it, right? So these are like little bit of additional stuff, right? So we need to concern about the intended use. Now let's move on. Now, now only we started to work on the hazard part. So previously you do homework, you complete everything, and then you started to develop the flow diagram, right? So this flow diagram is very important. And most of the time I see people are not putting the correct effort on flow diagrams. Why I'm saying this, right? You do flow diagram in your table, right? You do flow diagram in your table, right? And with your experience. So say for example, if you want to do a juice making, you say, okay, I know I'm in the industry for 20 years. This is how I do the juice making. If somebody said, okay, I know how to do the butchery part, like you can do with your experience. Fully agree, respect for that. But the standard said, okay, once you develop your flow diagram, right? Once you develop your flow diagram, you can see on-site confirmation of the flow diagram, right? You need to go to the site and you need to on-site verification. See, the food safety team shall confirm on-site the accuracy of the flow diagram, update the flow diagram where appropriate, and retain as a documented information. So this is very critical, right? So you need to do on-site verification. Let me try to understand, right? So how many of you have done the on-site verification part? How many of you have done the on-site verification part? You take all your flow diagrams, go to the site with the team, and then follow the process. If you do this, right? If you do this, you can see a lot of gaps. Say, for example, if I take the juice making, right? You might say, okay, a person put it into a like the container, put the like cleaning solution, keep it for 10 minutes, and then he will take it, he wash his hand or maybe with the gloves, put it into the machine, and then he will turn on the switch, and then put the glass and take the juice, right? That's simple as that. But if you go and observe this, there are so many changes, right? People sometimes they will collect into a separate basket, right? And then that will be there for like quite some time. Yeah. As you agree with me, right? And quite some time. Then from that particular basket only they fill it. That's wrong. Sometimes they put a like spoon and mix it. Right. So this verification is very important. Even in the manufacturing industry, sometimes like engineering team, they do some modification. So when you go through these line diagrams, you can see so many modifications, right? Sometimes like sometimes people will taste it. Of course, they have to do that. But that tasting step is not there in your process map. So now you have more homework, right? So what you can do is like go back, take few process maps and verify with the team. Lot of changes are there. And then these changes, the missing steps are crucial sometimes. Say for example, now your juice is there. So the person has to taste it. So he will take maybe he has a spoon in his like in the pocket. So he will take it from the pocket and then do the tasting and put it back, or maybe wipe it out from the tissue. So what do you think? If you do twice or thrice, there will be more hazard introduction, right? Maybe some paper pieces must be there, or maybe that while he's tasting, there can be like some saliva can touch it, so it can go into the product, right? So that step has been missing. So when you miss that step, right, when you after you complete the hazard plan, right, your hazard plan is not completed actually. Why? You miss the most critical step where you introduce the hazard. Yeah. So now you have more homework. Go back, take all your process map and run through the system. And then you can see a lot of changes, right? You can see a lot of changes, right? So modification, then you can come back. So this is very important. On-site confirmation. So basically what you do is like, you can have like, your entire HACCP system in as of soft copies, but this particular document, at least process map, you need to take it out and then you need to verify the food safety team members, right? everybody has to sign it off. Then hazard plan is there. Can I get the feedback? How many of you have done this task? How many of you have done this task? How many of you have done this task? If you've done this reaction, or maybe if you're not done, don't worry. So how many of you have done the verification part? This is one big gap I have been noticed, right? The process map, okay, we have people. Wakaru, you have done. So is there any abnormalities or like plan is perfect? What do you think? It's good when you do the process map verification, right? So if you do this exercise and sometimes there can be some modification. Right, there can be some modification. Every year, you do continuous improvement, right? So every year, when you do the continuous improvement, what will happen? You ended up with the different process map, right? So that's the kind of a critical area. So you have more homework, go back and check your process map again, right? Maybe you can divide if you have a lot of kitchen. Maybe what you can do is like say for example now we have a friend who has different kitchen, so maybe you can give the process map to a different people. Maybe the Sri Lankan kitchen people will go to the Maldivian kitchen team will come and do the Sri Lankan kitchen, so that will be nice, right? So then you have a cross functional process audit, right? So then you can identify, you can do a monitoring part. So this can be a part of the audit. Verification of the process map can be used as a kind of your internal audit, right? So this will be very practical. So when you do the practical training, not like online training program. So when you do the program, we will basically develop the process map and then we go to the site. And a lot of changes. Believe me, even very simple juice making, coffee making, you can see so many changes, right? You can see, okay, coffee, I know like how to make it. It's very simple. I can draw it. I believe everybody can do that. Juice making, everybody can draw. But after you draw it and when you go back to the real life and check, you ask somebody to carry on with the juice making or carry on with the coffee, right? You can see so many changes, right? So those are sometimes very crucial. So now you complete your background work, you complete your process map, right? So these are some examples. You can see so this is a one left hand side you can see the T, but this is not actually a correct one, right? So there are so many steps are missing, but you can see vanilla cake recipe, right? So these are so many, there will be so many additives ingredients adding, and then so a lot of complicated process, right? So these are some example. And then we need to make sure we need to have a description of the process and environment. So if you have a proper GMP requirement, good manufacturing practice requirement, you can define, say for example butchery, what is the room temperature, right? What is the condition of the table, right? What is the condition of the knife, whatever the equipment you are using, right? And then the floor, wall, gutter condition, all has to be there. So you need to basically describe, okay, depend on the bakery and a butchery or maybe cold kitchen, different kitchen. Okay, these are the process condition you need to maintain. Say for example, bakery, you need to have a certain, because it's a dry flow area, right? So you need to maintain dry flow in the bakery area. But if it is a butchery, you need to maintain wet flow condition, right? And then maybe air microbiology count is very high. So depend on the condition you need to maintain. So you identify what is the process requirement and the environment requirement for that particular process, right? Say you said that the last sentence, the description shall be updated as appropriate and maintained as documented information. So all this information has to be documented. So based on this document, say for example butchery, you try to maintain the temperature, right? So your checklist pretty much based on that outcome, right? So you try to verify, okay, temperature has to maintain like this. Okay, I'm verifying this, and then validation. Why I have to maintain this? Maybe a air count sample, right? So this is one critical area. And then now we are coming to hazard analysis. So here, food safety team shall conduct hazard analysis based on the primary information to determine the hazard that need to be controlled. The degree of control shall ensure food safety, and where appropriate combination of control measures shall be used. Now, the question, what do you mean by food safety team? Who should be there in the food safety team? So now, most of you are coming from a resort industry, right? So who will be there in the HACCP team? What kind of background? I'm not looking at the designation, but what kind of a background there should be? If you maintain a hygiene manager has to be there, agree? So he can be a leader, right? So what kind of a qualification or experience background? What do you think? So if you are into like resort, everyone, okay, what do you mean everyone? Executive chef is there, food handlers has to be there, okay? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? What kind of background they should have? So hygiene manager, everyone, we don't bring everyone. So if you're doing for OSHA's occupation health and safety, we want everyone to be part of the food safety team, the occupation health and safety team. But when it's come to food safety team, we don't want everyone, but we need a special, qualified people, at least some background. Yeah. So you need to have a person, resort doctor, yeah. Housekeeping manager, chief engineer, GM, RM, storekeeper, executive team, executive team. Okay. All right. Now, see, there should be a person with the microbiological background. So now, person should know about microbiology a little bit. Maybe your what you mentioned was like hygiene manager, or maybe executive chef, or maybe uh, chef, or maybe I don't know, maybe somebody should be a restaurant, should come with a little bit of microbiological background, and somebody know a little bit about the chemistry, and somebody should know about the the physical part, like the engineering manager. Of course, engineering manager has to be there, right? Because he knows like, okay, these are the point, like you have grease and the chemicals, and then wear and tear can be there, right? So this engineering part, right? So there should be some people with the microbiological, chemical, physical, background, like engineering background. And there can be other people also, like your restaurant manager, stores manager. So we need to have a team. We call it multidisciplinary team with little bit of this background, right? So, say for example, now what happen if you don't have a microbiologist, or if you don't have a chemist? What are you going to do? Say for example, now you in your case, you might say, okay, hygiene manager knows about the chemistry and microbiology. Fantastic, keep it. But there are resorts you don't have that person, microbiologist or chemist. Now what are you going to do? New naturalist. I don't think maybe, but food safety, I don't think naturalist has a big role. I don't know. Unless he is involved with the waste part and all. Yeah, if you have a QAP person, that would be ideal. So maybe you can sign off with the agreement with the microbiologist. So they will come and you don't need to have a permanent person. Sometimes that's why you get a consultant also. So with that background, so they can help you, and then you can include these external people. Yeah, third party. You can include external people into your team, and whenever you require, you bring them, because they don't need to be there throughout the hotel, because once they develop the system, you can be. But one more thing, so when you get a third party, you can pass the responsibility for the third party, right? So the hotel permanent management, resort permanent management is a responsible, right? Maybe you can get advice, you can get their expert knowledge and all, but of course you are responsible. So this food safety team has to be a multidisciplinary team. They have to have a different experience, exposure, right? And then they are the one who going to do the risk assessment. Food science background people, that would ideal. Maybe your food hygiene manager might have those background. So then one person can be a microbiologist and a chemist. That's fantastic, right? So this is one area. So food safety team, they have to do, after you complete the process map. So process map verification has to be done. And then after this, their job, right? They have to identify the hazard, right? So basically you identify under each and every step. Say for example, receiving of raw material. So raw material can be like fish, maybe dry food, whatever. You identify what is the chemical hazard, what is the physical hazard, what is the microbiological hazard, is there any allergenic? from this particular product. So you need to segregate that. So your incoming inspection checklist should link with that, right? So this is one particular area, right? So you identify under each and every process step, right? You identify what are the chemical, what are the physical, what are the microbiological, what are the allergens, right? So those things you need to identify. So it will be a very lengthy document. See, that's why process verification is very important. If you miss out any step, say for example, if you missed out any critical step, you are not going to like capture again. Say for example, tasting is missing out in your process map, right? Whatever the hazard associated with the tasting cannot be considered after that, right? So this is what we need to do, right? So hazard identification and acceptable determination level. Say for example, you say okay, when you receive the raw material, right? Or maybe like the vegetable. So these are my acceptable level. So you basically communicate with the relevant people. So this is like you can identify critical control point or whatever the requirement, right? So this is one particular main requirement in the identification level. So this has to be done by the team, right? So this step you started to identify. Say for example, if you are bringing a potato, right? Simple example. You are bringing a potato, receiving of potato. That's the step. So you identify potato has a physical characteristic. So physical hazard. It can be dust. It can be like the like some the dust particles or like sand. So that can be a physical hazard. And then chemical, maybe a pesticide, maybe a fungicide. So whatever these things apply. And then the microbiological, maybe fungus, right? So you can see, okay, fungus and allergenic. Normally under potato, we don't consider there as allergenic. So you say, okay, no. So that's only we do at this step. So we identify what are the hazard, like, four type of hazard, chemical, physical, microallergenic, right? Let's move on. So this is food safety team has to be done, right? So when you identify this, so there can be like, you will get your experience or maybe your legal requirement. So maybe country legal requirement might say, okay, if you are receiving oil, say for example, maybe coconut oil, palm oil, like, whatever the oil. So there are requirement like, maybe aflatoxin. So maybe sometimes government authority, they do the monitoring part. And then they will say, okay, this product will be hold because the aflatoxin level is bit high. Sometimes they might not do that, right? So then we might need to have like understanding of the supplier, because all resort you don't have a laboratory, inside laboratory, right? So if you started to check all the product at the receiving gate at the laboratory, that cost will be very high. So what are you going to do now? Say for example, now say you are a food safety team leader. Now you're bringing oil. I believe you need oil. It can be coconut oil, it can be palm oil, whatever the type of oil. So how do you make sure this oil is good? There's no chemical contamination like aflatoxin. How do you make sure this? Okay, you said approved supplier. How do you approve supplier? How you going to approve the supplier? You can ask from the oil supplier each every batch. Yeah, that would be lovely. So you can travel to. So if you can do on-site audit the supply, you can travel to Malaysia. Margaret, that's your plan, right? You want to travel, right? Yeah. So you can travel and then do audit with the oil supplier. That would be lovely, right? But what you can, yeah, audit supplier. I think like Sadiq also, like you want to go travel, right? It will be very expensive process, right? Yeah, we have worked with standard certified supplier. Everybody wants to travel, I guess. Like you want to field visit for the oil supplier. Yeah, maybe you use the oil supply evaluation form, but only thing like you can see, you can ask for a certificate of analysis. See, all manufacturers, right? They before they dispatch the sample, dispatch the product, they do their own testing, right? So field visit, if you have a chance, do that. So you can travel to Malaysia or maybe where you get the oil, like mainly Malaysia, right? Yeah. That's a charming. But a lot of people want to travel, charming. You should allow them, right, to travel. Logistic, and it will be very expensive, right? But if you have a chance, take it, right? But I'm telling you the low cost model. You can ask from the supplier, send me a certificate of analysis. We call document called COA, certificate of analysis, right? So all manufacturers, you can do oil quality test and pH test on site. If you have a laboratory, right? Sometimes we call peroxide value, so you can check the rancidity and all kind of a thing. But if you don't have a facility, best thing, ask for a COA, right? Certificate of analysis. Each batch you can ask for a certificate of analysis. In manufacturing industry, we ask that, right? All raw materials, they have to give us a certificate of analysis because every batch they do this testing before they release. That's why I told you at the beginning, the manufacturers, they have luxury because they are not releasing the product to a market unless they got a chemical and microbiological clearance. So that report is already there. So it's a matter of asking. Now you have more homework. So you go back, check all the high risk product suppliers, and then ask for a certificate of analysis, right? So you can do that, right? And then so this legal requirement. So when you do a hazard identification, you can identify that part, right? So I'm talking about the control, right? So when you identify this hazard, right? So you identify, okay, what are the steps you need to do? What are the process equipment you need to do? Like, all activities you need to cover. So when you do the hazard identification, say for example, now I'm going back to very simple example, the orange squeezing machine, right? So you have like, you already said like, all materials are the food grade, agree, like plastic materials. And then when you do the squeezing and all, there are blades inside, right? So in this orange machine, there are blades, right? Team, you agree with me, right? There are blades, right? How many of you have checked those blades? So if those blades are damaged, what will happen? So those are the part of hazard. So then you need to have a kind of a mod. And I'm not, don't ask for a metal detector, right? All juice should go through the metal detector. Don't do that, right? So because if it is a manufacturing industry, of course, yes, you need to do that. But in your industry, but you need to have like, every day or maybe every shift, you do the cleaning, right? So you can check and you can ask, train your people to check, is there any damages and all. But these materials are quite good, but sometimes when you check this, the equipment, you see there's damages. So when you do the internal audit, go into that depth. Don't say, okay, look, this is good. Okay, show me the checklist. Don't do a document audit. So okay, let me dismantle, like, don't do that as auditor, but ask somebody to do that, right? So these are acceptable level, right? Now when you do the hazard identification, you need to identify what is the acceptable level, right? So you do risk assessment, and then you do like, probability severity, like, analysis part, you do that, right? And then when you do the probability severity analysis, like, you identify what would be the most significant one, what would be the less significant one, right? So based on your probability and the severity, let me explain, like, say for example, now let me ask this question from you. When you do, I believe everybody is familiar with the hazard study. So imagine there's a tea bag, right? Uh, you have inside one tea bag, you have a metal, like, metal piece is there. Like say metal nail will be there from the machine, tea bag machine, inside the tea bag. And then other tea bag has a chemical, pesticide or whatever. Which one is the risky one? The tea bag with the metal piece, that will say A. Tea bag with the chemical is B. Which one is the high risk for the consumer? Okay, both. So I'll make sure your life is so SS metal piece, the nail is there. So inside the tea bag, that is SS. There are people who are saying both. Okay. Uh, so tea bag. This is a tea bag, right? Black tea bag. Okay. Now think of intended use. Go back and think of intended use. What is the intended use of the tea bag? So when you do the risk assessment, you need to do this as well. What do you mean by intended use? So tea bag, you are putting into the infusion. Yeah, agreed. Boiling water, keep it for 3 minutes, and then you take it out. Right? Now give me the answer. Considering the intended use. So one tea bag, SS nail is there, other tea bag, chemical is there. So when you do the risk assessment, you need to consider the intended use as well. Agreed, Ruby? Yeah, spot on, right? See, the nail, SS nail, right? It will, it doesn't affect for the person, right? Because it's a SS nail and it come out and then you have the extract. Infusion is there. But what about the chemical? Yeah, agreed. Chaminda agreed. So I mean, like you talk about the probability, right? So if it is a nail, there's a high chance it can come out. So then situation is different, right? If the nail is come out and but tea bag, do you think like it will come out? But I don't know. There's a probability. Agreed. Both can be hazard, physical and chemical. Both can be hazard, but which will be the more effect for the person, right? So if it is effect more because person doesn't know there's a chemical contamination, right? But metal piece, okay, there's a Chamin agreed. There's a chance. There's a chance. There's a chance it can come out from the bag because of the sharp edge, right? But again, chemical. So when you do a risk assessment, right? So that's why you need to have a team, right? You argue, you fight. So this will be a very interesting dialogue, right? The chef might say, okay, this is high risk because of that, and then F&B manager said, okay, no, this is the low risk because people, this is how they eat, right? So then what happened? Say, for example, when you do a risk assessment, somebody might say, okay, like say we will put a category high risk is 5, medium risk is 3, and the low risk is 1, right? So the chef will say, okay, this is the medium risk, 3, and the F&B manager say this is high risk. Now what are you going to do? So there are two things. F&B said, okay, your food safety team, F&B is there, chef is there. Chef say, okay, no, this is low risk. But due to some reason, say for example, now the chemical, the tea bag scenario. So the chemical has agreed. Everybody agreed. Say okay, it's a high risk, right? And then Chaminda and myself we are fighting. I'm saying okay, this is a medium risk. Chaminda said high risk. Now which one we should go? Agreed. Respect both parties, but you should put only one figure. Now about what we're going to do. So the chemical part agreed. Everybody agreed is a high risk. Right now, there's a situation. Chaminda will say, okay, is a high risk. I'm saying low risk. Yeah, you guys are spot on, right? And then Wakaru, spot on. Because always we need to go with the high figure. So if Chaminda said high risk, and then when you do the revision, hazard revision, you need to relook at that. So when are you going to do the hazard revision? If there's any complaint, if there's any hazard escalation, or if there's any changes in the world, you have to do. Say there's nothing happened. Now when are you going to do the revision? You don't need to do that, right? Is it? No, every year. If there's no changes at all, you have to again revise it. Right? You have to revise it at least annually because accreditation audit requirement is such, right? So every year you need to at least revise. So when you do the revise, you come back and check. So Chaminda said, okay, it's high risk. I'm saying Rasita said is a medium risk. I didn't say low, right? Because tea bag should not contain metal part, right? First of all, is something wrong with that supply, right? So you need to blacklist him, right? Because you don't know like it. It's either high or medium, not cannot be low, right? So because I rated as a low risk, the medium risk because of the intended use, right? So we argue with that, and then Chaminda said high risk. Everybody said high risk. Go with that. But then again, you annually you revise it. So this is one particular area, right? So this is when you do the process map hazard identification, and then you argue, you have a lot of the discussion with the team, and then agreed. And there's a thumb rule, if it is a high risk activity, of course, if the majority agreed on high risk, you have to go with that, and then the revision can be done next year only, right? So here we basically identify the likelihood and the probability and the impact, right? Say when you do the probability and impact, what you need to identify is like, the outcome, or maybe you need to consider the intended use. Now, let me ask this question. Okay, let me ask this question. Okay, I got a question. What is this? Yeah, Ruby, agreed. Yeah. If the nail come out, like it will be, so then it will start to make noise also, right? In the tea. So imagine we are talking about the tea, right? It's very simple. Like poison is effect immediately. So it's just anything happens, sometimes recover. So chemical side is not considered. Yeah, yeah. So now I like this. So now you started to argue. This dialogue, this argument is this very healthy argument, right? We need this, right? So then you started to search, you started to get information, yeah, agreed. Past and yep. Uh, in the T's, I like it. I like it. I like it. So somebody said like it can be seen, and then Chamindra said, no, it's dark color, you can't see. Agreed. Right. So we need this conversation, we need this dialogue, right? So when you do the HACCP part, right? Now let me come back. So when it comes to this HACCP part, right? Say for example, you need to identify the intended use and then the outcome of this, right? Say for example, now we have one situation like say what do you think about the what do you call the fruits, right? What do you think about the fruits? Do you think it's a high risk product or low risk product? Go back to the intended use. Fruits, what do you think? High risk. Why low risk? Because like you consume, right? No cooking, no nothing, right? So that's why you have a separate area. So when you do the HACCP study, right? You need to of course consider the intended use. Ready to eat, right? So it doesn't go through any process. The salad, same. Salad same, right? So you are not only we consider milk, meat, those are, and then peanut, allergenic, but of course, yep. We consider this as a kind of like high risk product. So your process map, everything has to be in line with that. So your supply has to control those areas, right? So this is one example. You can use different format, right? You can use different format, but this is one example. You can see you can see here the step one process step, process steps has to be there. So you do biological, physical, uh, micro contamination due to manual handling, threat like plastic, polyethylene material, RM and packing material. So then you, based on your criteria, you identify what is the severity, what is the likelihood, and then you identify your risk category. So you can see the physical they identify as a low, maybe depend on the criteria they given and the high risk, and then of course they identify what are the prevent. So you can identify different mechanism and then if you are going by the codex, right, there are decision trees, right? You basically go with the decision tree. But right now, all the new standard doesn't go through the decision tree. If you are going through the decision tree, that's also fine. But in decision tree, you will end up with either CCP or not a CCP, right? But in this scenario, you identify the PRP, OPRP, and a CCP. So prerequisite program, that's similar to GMP, operational prerequisite program, and the critical control point. Let me touch that as well, right? So let me go back. So this is the format, normally different format people use. So then once you identify, right? Once you identify your OPRP and CCP, right? Then you identify like, okay, these are the control point. So what is the difference? If you do the definition, like almost similar, critical control point and operational prerequisite program. But if you identify what is the major difference in CCP? See, CCP is a world end. Beyond that, you can't do anything. Say, for example, if you identify, okay, my particular temperature, 75 is 75, like you say, okay, my cooking temperature, 75, 5 minutes, right? So if you go 73 6 minutes. No, that's wrong, right? Or maybe 76 4 minutes. No, because somebody has done a research. And do you know, like, how do people identify this, the particular temperature or maybe shelf life? They have to do a series of research, right? And then they need to have a validate results, like microbiological results. Then only they identify, okay, this is my limit, 75 into 5. So that is the world end, right? No, you can't do anything. But OPRP is like, you try to, like, say for example, if you, after you manufacture a product, and if it is less than your critical temperature, then only option is you need to discard it, right? It's a waste of money. So then what people try to do is, like, people try to bring a level where you can play around. Say, for example, if your temperature is 75, that's the maximum you need to go. So then what you try to do is, like, you identify there's a certain temperature, maybe like, above, say, 7, you identify OPRP point as a 76 and a 78. So then you try to play around, like, okay, 76 to 78, that's the margin. So if it is comes down to 76, you go up to 78 and try to maintain it. So that's the operational control. But now you might have a problem. You say, okay, why can't we go to the 80 and then problem solved? No, you can't go to 80, because then your product, the taste, organoleptic taste will be damaged. Right? Now the challenge for food safety is you need to maintain the food safety while giving the proper taste. Right? Say for example, now milk, the pasteurized milk. Have anyone drink the pasteurized milk? The raw pasteurized milk? Not the Tetra Pak one, because when you have the Tetra Pak product, it has a lot of flavors. It tastes good, right? So if you drink a pasteurized milk, the raw one, it doesn't give the flavor of the milk, right? Say if you're buying a milk, the normal milk are staying in a fridge, right? But pasteurized milk, you can keep it outside. Why? It goes through a different process. We call it heat shock, right? So all, like, it assures there's no microorganism, including porous generated microorganism. Why? It goes through a heat shock. Like, what do you mean by heat shock? It basically, like, temperature, all of, like, within few seconds you can increase up to 100, and then within few seconds you can decrease up to, like, 0, right? So if there's a porous generated microbes are there, so they don't know what to do. But if you gradually increase the temperature, what they do, so they have a kind of a shell, porous, and then they can survive. And then when it's come to a, like, temperature, normal temperature, they started to active again. But if you go through this heat shock twice, right? Then what will happen is, like, this, they don't know what to do. So the microbes are zero. But only thing, when you go through that, like, milk is a protein, right? You won't get the same flavor. So there's a special machine, like, you don't use, we call it PHE, plate heat exchanger, like, industry they use. So they use this to, like, pasteurize product. So now my question, so if you identify the control point, say your control point has to be, uh, capable of, like, meeting the taste, and then same time kill all the microbes, or remove all the chemicals, or, like, make sure there's no allergenic reaction, right? So those are the critical control point. And then OPRPs are there, like, make sure, there's a area you can play. So when you do this risk assessment, right? When you do this risk assessment, you identify, what are the CCPs and what are the OPRPs. So, and then, when you identify the, CCPs and OPRPs, then you identify, okay, this particular product, this product line, I have one CCP, right? Or maybe two CCPs, right? And then this product line, I have, three or four OPRPs, and I have so many GMPs. So you have monitoring checklist in line with that. Say you start with the process map, you do a risk assessment, right? Hazard identification and hazard risk assessment. Then you ended up with, the OPRP, PRP, and CCP, and then all the checklist monitoring are in line with that, right? So then you continuously start monitoring. Like if it is a CCP, no matter what, you need to do that. So the OPRP frequency is less and PRP frequency is less. right? So if it is a CCP, every batch you need to monitor it, right? So this is one critical area. And then when you identify the control point, of course you need to give like a corrective action if failures. Say for example now CCP, if there's a CCP violation, maybe there are some product you can reuse it, go through the same process, but there are some product you can't do that. Say for example now maintenance of ice cream temperature, right? So you need to maintain like -18, whatever the temperature you identify, right, given by the supply. And then if there's a failure, so you identify, okay, if there's a failure, and then if you identify there's a separate, now what are you going to do? So now in your kitchen, like in stores, there's a huge power failure and you can't maintain the temperature. You identify there are a lot of ice creams are there. When you check, it's segregated, the water and a fat layer. Now what are you going to do? So it's a violation of CCP. Now what are you going to do? What is your decision? Now I believe all the food safety team are there. Now you face this kind of a situation. Now what are you going to do? Okay. So Chavendra said, can mix again. No, you can't. Discard, right? You need to discard because how can you mix? Because see, remove discard because you can't mix ice cream, right? Ice cream normally, like we know the oil and water cannot mix together, right? So there are special machine they use with different ingredients to make ice cream. So if you want to mix again, you have to go back, right? And do it. So you can't mix it, right? So only option is discard. So shall I ask one question? Uh, you receive a like a pack of like the bulk egg, raw egg, and then you see a fungus. No, it's not coming to danger zone. No, you can't mix it because you won't get the flavor and you don't know. Say like there's a chemistry behind. Like say for example, any product you have certain amount of microbes, right? When you keep it in a freezer, right? When you keep it in a freezer, only thing is microbes cannot grow, right? Moment you break the cold chain, microbes started to grow. We don't know. So the growth, I mean, like breakage mean even in the ice cream, there can be a microbe growth, right? So even if you mix it, you can't go for it, right? So because the product is already out, so only option is the discard, right? I know it's an expensive option, but you have to discard. Now, my second question. So, receiving, you have certain PRPs, right? Receiving of eggs. So, you can see that when you receive egg, right? Uh, maybe Dhoni, they have like turn off their the cold room or whatever. And then there's a fungus growth eggs you receive at the receiving bay. Now, what are you going to do? Now, what are you going to do? Reject, yeah. But can't you wash it and take it? Fungus is outside now. Fungus is outside. But then again, there's a problem. Fully agreed, right, guys? Fully agreed. Fully agreed. You have to reject it. You can't wash it and take it. Don't do that, right? Right? Because fungus they send the aflatoxin, right? Can't use, right? So because porous on the shell, yeah. So porous on the shell, maybe you can return to the supplier. But okay, Ruby, nice answer. When you return to the supplier, what happens if he clean and send it to you back? Normally, we don't return to the supplier, right? If possible, like these kind of sensitive items, right? When you sign a supply agreement, if there's a damage, this kind of a thing, you basically discard, send the pictures, and then get the claim from the supplier, right? But because if you return it, right, maybe they might clean and send it back to you or maybe somebody else. They can do that, right? So this is a very crucial. Sometimes if you identify a food safety violation, this kind of a critical violation, I mean, like you need to have a strong agreement with the supplier. You have to discard it and take pictures and maybe in front of the supplier damage and like should not use it, right? So I mean, like you can return to the supplier, but he might send using a mixed lot, not the same lot, like they can mix it. So sometimes, like eggs, you have like expiry dates are given there, right? So this is one area. So when you have a control measures, the control measures have to explain, like what is the corrective action, right? Yeah, you can get it replacement from the supplier, that's the easy way, right? And then validation control measures mean, like you identify, okay, these are my control measures. So this is receiving control measures. This is like in process control measures. So all control measures has to be validated. Say for example, now I ask first question, like when everybody like visit to the kitchen, the method is, even visitor, we need to wash the hands. We need to wear the hair caps, hair nets, and have a separate coat. So you can see people are wearing the hair net and caps, right? That's fine. But how do you validate, right? People are like, washing their hands. So only thing, maybe you can check the CCTV and then validate, or maybe I believe like CCTV is a quite new thing for you, right? In manufacturing industry, we really check that. Even when you do the internal audit, so somebody said, okay, we are coming to the audit, everybody wash their hands on that particular day, right? But like if you check the CCTV, you will get fantastic results, right? So this is one area, like you need to validate, or maybe take hands off in a random manner. So that is one thing. And then you need to identify, validate methodology, and then of course you need to maintain documented information on the validation part. So this is one particular area it's very important. So you start with the process map, you identify the hazard, then you identify, okay, these are my CCPs under this particular process, and these are my OPRPs, these are my the GMP OPRPs, and then you identify what are the validation method, right? So then you need to identify the plan. So when you identify the plans, HACCP plan, right? So this has to be documented. Food safety hazard to be controlled at CCP or PRP, critical limits, monitoring procedure, correction to be made if critical limits action criteria are not met, responsibility and authority, record of monitoring. So this document has to be there, and this document should be communicated with the person who managed that part. Say most of the time in resort, whatever we what we notice is all these informations are available in your manuals, right? In your manual. But after you complete the hazard, like you identify your CCPs and OPRPs, relevant process owner should know about this, right? This should be displayed. Okay, this is my CCP. And then in that CCP, people should know, okay, what is my critical limit? If it is a freezer, what is my critical limit? And what is the monitoring procedure? Okay, checklist has to be there every, like, every hour, or like, twice a day we monitoring. And what is my corrective action? Correction. If the critical limit is not meeting, right? And then who's responsible? Who's authorized for this? And then record of monitoring. That part has to be there, right? So this is very important. And then when you determine the critical limit and action criteria, so these document information there had to be there, right? Like what are the things you are going to monitor, what are the things, who's capable of that, and what is the monitoring part. And then of course, if it is a temperature, thermometer has to be calibrated. What do you mean by calibrated? Say for example, now if you're using a thermometer, it you that thermometer, or maybe you can keep a separate thermometer, like standard thermometer. Each, like whatever the results should be, like linked to national or international standard. Say even if it is a weighing scale, like you are taking a weight, you'll say, okay, this is a 10 gram, but how do you know like actually it's a 10 gram? Right? If you're using, adding like critical equipment, the critical ingredient, so this is very matter, right? Say for example, you are taking a temperature measurement, you say, okay, this is minus 18, but how do you know like this is exact minus 18? So you need to have at least calibrated thermometer which is linked to a national or international calibration. Then you can cross check, okay, I have a calibrated thermometer, I'm checking against that, and then this particular temperature also giving the same reading, or maybe there are plus or minus errors. So you can say, okay, if the calibrated thermometer giving minus 18, but exactly there's a minus 1 error. So okay, so what I'll do is like I'll communicate that, right? So the person who measurement has to communicate that. So here the 14 food allergens, like, these are like, there are regional allergens also there, but these are like, based on the WHO guideline, right? And then we need to monitor all the CCPs. There should be a record of the all CCPs, like monitoring part. And then sometimes top management has to monitor, like, validate whether these CCPs are measured correctly, right? So sometimes, like, you have a data, but then again, there are violations, right? But somebody has to validate this information, right? So these are the monitoring part, and then monitoring CCP. So, like, when you do the monitoring CCP, like, there should be an adequate time frame. Say, for example, temperature monitoring, like, every other hour or maybe twice a day you monitor. And then what is the monitoring mechanism? What is the device they use, right? What is the device they use, right? And then calibration method, right? So what is the calibration method they use, right? And then what is the monitoring frequency, and what would be the monitoring results, and then, like, who will be responsible and authority to release the monitoring result. So can I ask this question? What do you mean by responsibility and authority? So is there any different, or like it can be the same person? Say, for example, somebody is who's responsible for monitoring the freezer temperature, and who's authorized for, like, those temperature, if there's any changes. What do you mean by that? Is there different, or it will be the same? What do you think? Say for example, yeah, it should be two-person, right? Yeah, different person. Because see, temperature monitoring can be done, say maybe person from a stores, right? But temperature, the authorization, if there's a deviation, maybe it can lies with the chef, executive chef, or the chief engineer, right? Authorization will be different. Like, if the temperature goes wrong, right? The authorization will be like, more senior person, not with the same person, right? So this is the one crucial area, right? And then when you do the monitoring part, CCP has to be monitored. There should be a frequency, and if there's a failure, critical limit, like, what should be done, like, say for example, if you have a one cold room is failure. Now, let me ask this question. If there's a power failure, say you identify minus 18 or minus 10 or minus 5, whatever temperature, or maybe, like, identify, okay, temperature is 5 to 10. But if there's a power failure, now what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So now you identify, okay, there are 2 hour power failure. Now what are you going to do? That's 2 hour power failure. What are you going to do? Report to the engineer. All right. Then what are you going to do? Don't open, yeah, agreed. So report to the engineer, agreed. Don't open. Normally, what we do is, like, sometimes people, uh, yeah, agreed, critical items, report to the engineer, yeah. Because sometimes what people do is, like, if there's a power failure, they open and check whether temperature is okay. Because, like, see, what we do is, we want to maintain, like, say for example, you consider, like, okay, the temperature is minus 18, and if you keep this product for like 12 hours, 6 hours, whatever the time, right, then product will be minus 18, right? That's the theory, right? So if you keep close, like, you need to do this research also, right, as a team. If there's a power failure, how long this minus 18 temperature will be remain in the product, right? At least in the product, right? Remain in the product, right? So then if the temperature remain in that particular product, you are quite okay. But when you go for HACCP and when you go for ISO 20000, there's another plan we are working on, emergency response plan, right? If there's a power failure, like, somebody said, okay, Ruby said, like, and remove the items that are critical. So you might be having a backup generator. So you use the backup generator, okay, I'll restart it again. Or maybe you might have a supplier who can immediately provide the backup generator. So that's a part of the plan, right? That has a plan, emergency case. Or maybe you can transfer this product into somewhere else, some other refrigerator. So these things you need to identify, right? When you identify the OPRP and, like, PRP, basically, right? So and then based on the data you can take a critical decision, right? And then so this is this part, like when you do a hazard, right? Like critical limits are not met, the organization shall specify correction and corrective action. So maybe maybe correction can be like hold the product, or maybe corrective action can be like go for second other option, like there can be different thing. Potentially unsafe product are not released. The cause of non-conformity can be identified. The parameter of CCP or PRP you identify, and then if there's any recurrence you can identify, and then you can see this particular picture also, like you identify. There are 5 steps. So when you go for HACCP, you identify the 7th step, but this is basically a like very simple one. Say build your HACCP team, and then describe your product, review product and process. So you go and do the physical verification, then you outline the product, and then follow 7 HACCP principles. So these are the 5 steps. So you need to have a very strong HACCP team, right? So when you try to implement the action plan, right? So like basically you need to identify the right people, right people with the right background, and then describe the process. So when you are describing the process, right, just go back to the GMP. So like I basically summarize like those areas, like your facility has to be there certain requirement, like entrance, hand washing, the pest control, like all this facility, and then your storage, like the warehouse, right, basic warehouse, right, what are the warehouse basic requirement, and then you need to make sure like the equipment, condition of the equipment, right, all materials, and then your people, and then of course cleaning and disinfection part for all these categories. And then if you are satisfied with this, then you can start doing the hazard plan, right? And then you have to make sure like develop the hazard plan and then communicate. So like I believe like all of you have a hazard plan, all completed hazard plan, but how many of you have complete the CCP, communicate the CCP with the relevant process owners? Say, for example, you identify this is a particular CCP, critical control point. And then, like I explained, like, what is the requirement, what is the corrective action, who's responsible, what is the monitoring, all that part. Have you communicated, display that part? How many of you have done that? Yeah, so you have more homework, right? So see, participating for this particular program, you got a lot of homework, right? So you can start communicating. So you don't need an external person to communicate this, right? So you can identify your CCPs, and then you can have like identify, okay, this particular CCPs belongs to the butchery, right? Okay, you take a separate session, like with the butchery team. That's it. So then display that part. So then they know like, okay, I need to maintain this particular CCP, and these are my responsibilities, and these are the people who authorize if there's a violation, right? So this will be very, very important information, right? So this implementation has a plan is very important, and then control of monitoring and measuring part. But look at this, right? So you can see this particular picture. This person actually using the like the thermometer with the connector, right? So maybe SS connector. Is there? I'm like most of the people they use this, but this is a finished product. What do you think of this? What do you think of this? Looking at this picture, what do you think of this? A lot of chefs they use this, right? What do you think of this? What do you think of this? There are advantage, there are disadvantage. What do you think of this if you use this kind of a thermometer with the probe? You touch the product and you check it, check the temperature. So what do you think of this? Yeah, you need to sanitize this, right? Every time you take it, you need to sanitize this. Otherwise, this can be a source of the contamination. But instead of this, you can use the IR, infrared. But there's a disadvantage. See, this, if you have a probe, you can get the like product, the inside temperature. But if you are using IR one, only surface. So you need to identify which one is there and how to minimize the contamination, right? So this is one particular picture, right? So you need to control the monitoring, measuring, and then you need to have a calibrated or verify specified intervals. So what we recommend is like, any resort you might use like, maybe 20, 30 number of thermometers or maybe more than that. So if you started to go for calibration, it will be huge cost. So what you can do is you can get a one calibrated thermometer and then you can have an internal calibration process. I believe you are doing that, right? Internal calibration process, maybe with the engineering team, and then you calibrate everything once a month. Even weighing scale, you can do that. And then based on the calibration, say for example, they might say, okay, there's a plus one error, plus two error, right? That part has to be communicated. Say for example, cool room, when you identify the temperature, there's always a plus. What happened? Chaminda, Chaminda said there's an issue with the connection. Others, can you hear me very clearly? Others, how about others? Yeah, all right. Shamil, I think like our team might be recording it. So you should be able to get the recording as well. Maybe you need to check with Nawodi and Shehan. I think we are recording it, right? So Shehan, we are recording this, right? So maybe we can give the recording. Yeah.
Yes, yes, we are recording this.
All right. Okay. So Chaminda, don't worry. You can get the recording, and if you have any clarification, anything, you can contact one of us. We'll be happy to help you. Right. Okay. So I think that problem also solved. So when you do the calibration, like, what I'm talking is like, you identify there's a gap. Say you identify plus one error. So that error you need to communicate with the person who start monitoring. So most of the time, like, when we do for a inspection or like, audit, we notice like, when they measure like, I'm like, everything is correct. You have a calibrated thermometer, you check against that, and then every time there's a plus minus whatever the errors are there, one two errors are there, then but that error was not communicated to the person who's doing the monitoring. So maybe your checklist say, okay, this month you whatever you need to add one, or maybe you need to subtract one, because the calibrated thermometer is saying that. So then person should, like, whenever he put the reading, he know like, okay, I need to add one or two. So imagine if the error is 10 plus, of course you need to replace it, right? So you need to have a criteria. So this is a very practical approach, right? You need to have a criteria. Okay, I go maximum up to 3 or 4. Then after that, I'm going to reject this, right? Or I'm going to replace it, or maybe repairing it, right? So then this requirement has to be there, right? And then of course I'm like, the calibrated thermometer, you can't just put like, in an open environment. So you have to maintain that calibrated thermometer in the protected place where deterioration is minimum, right? So these are the kind of requirement you need to check, right? And then when you do the calibrate and verification, the like, this information has to be documented. That's why I said, like, when you have a monitoring checklist every month, like, you can say, okay, this is plus or minus, so there's no error. So that communication has to be there. So all these results and document has to be there. And then, so when you do software, I don't think, is there anyone who's using software, the temperature or anything? Anyone using the software? I don't think you are using, right? But sometimes, like, industry people, they are using the software. Say, for example, you have a cool room everywhere, and then you have a software, so it's automatically give the results, right? Or maybe you are doing a transportation, you have a software. So then this software has to be validated, right? Because otherwise, like, you don't know like what error results they are giving, right? So this is the kind of a requirement, but the industry they use, because sometimes a lot of industries they are automated, but in the hotel industry, the resort industry, you don't use software. But let me I have time, right? So let me give one particular example. Say, for example, the cold room and all, since we are talking about the cold room, the temperature, one particular area, like, you identify always there was a drop. The temperature was not maintaining. That's the challenging. Say, for example, you need to maintain temperature between 5 and 10. right? So then the temperature is not maintaining actually properly. Like, always it's 12, 13 kind of a thing. So when you ask this question, like why you are violating the OPRP requirement, because you have to maintain below 10. But then the answer we got is like, always we have to open this and go like, take the product, right? So then we have a discussion like, there's something there's a planning error, right? Why you need to open every time, like, maybe 20, 30 times. So we need to identify a kind of a like, mechanism, how many times they open. So when we ask like, how many times they open, they say well, maybe 10 to 15 times. But then what we did was like we put a counter, like like there's when you open the door, there was a counter, right? So when you analyze that information, we ended up like per day it's about like 80 times. So that's unbelievable. 80 times you are opening the walk-in chiller. Right. So then we said, okay, something wrong. Like, you can't open 80 times because there's an issue with the planning. And then next week when we check, only 10. But again, temperature's out. Now, now there's no correlation. 80 times temperature out, 10 times temperature out. So now what do you think what happened? Any guess? Any guess? Can someone guess? So people are smart, right? People are smart. So what they did was like, now they thought like, the problem is the counting. So what they did was in the morning, they open 10 times and then after that they paste it with the sticker and they stop it and they continue with the normal routine work 80 times per day. Temperature is out. Now what we did was like, we discuss and yeah, time temperature is abuse. Yeah, that's wrong thing, right? So now what we did was like, you put the system automatically if the moment temperature goes, there's a buzzer, right? And then of course we go back, do the root cause analysis and the planning part, right? So those activities has to be there. So when you do a proper hazard, you might go into that level, right? The operational level, right? So this is one area. And then of course you need to do a verification part, like PRP implementation, like say for example, cleaning checklist, right? So somebody has to verify whether the cleaning has been done properly, right? So inspection has to be there. So cleaning team will do the cleaning part, but you verify cleaning has been done. And then if there's a hazard, all hazard has to be verification has to be there. So these are the verification activity. So like you need to have a separate HACCP chart, CTP chart, the verification plan, and the validation plan has to be there, and then team has to maintain this verification and validation plan, right? So then when you do the verification and then maybe in product testing, yeah, maybe like, you identify every water. If you have a water plant in the resort, right? You check the chlorine level or maybe you send the sample, you check TDS, whatever, like basic equipment. So those are will be like, verification part, right? So these are the verification part. And then when you do the results of verification, food safety team shall conduct the analysis of results of verification that shall be used as an input to the performance evaluation of the food safety management system. So this is very crucial because when you do a verification, right, you will get a lot of data. Say, for example, water, temperature, water pH, chlorine level, right, chemical residuals level, all right. And then when you send the sample for the laboratory, you will get like, micro chemical contamination. So all this data you need to analyze. And then when you do analyze, sometimes some product levels are below your the legal requirement. So you can accept. But if you analyze that, right? So you can see the particular, like say for example, water is below the legal requirement, but you can see the upward trend, right? So maybe you can go back and check, okay, something wrong with my RO plant. Maybe you can check, talk to your RO, like the plant supplier. So food safety team should be aware about all these data. So it's not isolated data. When you do the verification, it has to be like analysis data. So you have a trend, right? You identify what are the trends, right? So this is the verification part, right? Now, I think like we need to give time for the Q&A session as well, but we have about 10 minutes, right? Okay, so if I give a summary, right? If I give a summary, I start with the GMP, good manufacturing practices. So I told you, like, don't go for any HACCP program without proper GMP. So GMP basically like consists with the infrastructure, the facility, your people, your warehouse, and the equipment, right? So you need to have a proper system for that, and then you need to have a cleaning and sanitation process. So that's the GMP part. So when you have a GMP, then you do a lot of work on the raw material as well as you do work on the end product, and then of course intended use. We have some question about the intended use, and then most important part is the process flow diagram, right? Of course, you have some homework. You need to go back and check the verification of the process map. And then you start working the hazard identification, chemical, physical, microallergenic hazard. And then you do the risk assessment part, like depend on the probability and severity. And then you identify what is my critical control point, what is my operational prerequisite, what is my PRP. And then, of course, you identify the monitoring mechanism part, and then you identify validation, verification part. And then, of course, when you identify the CCP and OPRP, you identify how we're going to control it. So this entire 2 hour, basically, I try to cover everything with some practical example. Right. Now, if you have a question, it's time you to ask. Then I'll try to give my best to give you the feedback. Team, you have any question? Oh, like, did I confuse you all? All right. Oh, all right. Okay. I believe, like, Shahan and Navoti, they basically, like, share with you the videos. So if you have any question, you can get in touch with them. Even if you have now, like, you can ask. Since I'm already in, even though we do this program online, I'm in Maldives. So my team is basically in Colombo. Uh, Thank you, Chaminda. I got a good feedback from Chaminda. Thank you. Right. All right. Okay. So if you have any question, you can chat and everything. So let me hand you to Navodi again to conclude this. Thank you for your participation. Thank you all. Navodi, back to you. Okay. Because okay, Chaminda wants the video, right? Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Asitan Roshana, for that insightful and engaging session. And thank you to all our participants for joining us today and for your active participation throughout the webinar. We hope today's session has provided you with practical knowledge and valuable insight that you can apply within your research operation to strengthen food safety and HACCP implementation. As a reminder, Moldiviana is a consultancy company for a range of professional services, including HACCP and ISO consultancy, internal audits, food safety inspection, in-staff training, lab testing support, compliance assessment, and sustainability related services. If our organization requires any support in these areas, please feel free to contact us using these phone numbers in and email addresses shared in the chat. On behalf of Maldivian ISO Consultancy Company, thank you once again for being with us this evening. We wish you all continued success and look forward to connecting with you again in future programs. Good night and stay safe.